Thank you. Dr. Woodcock?
Good morning, Chair Murray, Ranking Member Burr, and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify. FDA's thousands of employees remain steadfast in fighting this pandemic. Our work continued during the holiday season and led to critical advancements in combating the virus. The agency has been closely monitoring the potential impact of the Omicron variant on the currently available vaccines, diagnostics, and therapeutics. I'll provide a brief update on actions the agency has taken in these three areas since I last testified before this committee. First, regarding vaccines. The currently authorized and approved vaccines remain highly effective at preventing serious outcomes associated with COVID-19 infection, including hospitalization and death. Additionally, data evaluated by the FDA suggests that an additional booster shot following the completion of primary vaccination series provides further protection against these outcomes. Following these data, FDA updated the Pfizer, BioNTech, and Moderna vaccine EUAs to shorten the time between completion of a primary series and a booster dose to at least 5 months rather than 6 months. FDA also updated the Pfizer, BioNTech EUA, so it's now available for a primary series in children ages 5 and older, and for the use of a booster dose in all individuals 12 through 15 years of age after completion of primary vaccination, as you've already heard from Dr. Walensky, as the CDC followed up on this. The agency also authorized the Pfizer vaccine for a third primary series dose for certain immunocompromised children that are 5 through 11. These vaccines have met FDA's rigorous standards, and the bottom line is getting vaccinated or receiving a booster with one of the currently available vaccines is the best thing the public can do right now to protect themselves and those they care about. It is not too late to get vaccinated or get boosted. Second, diagnostic tests, which are another key line of defense in this pandemic. Increasing access to accurate, rapid, at-home tests continues to be a priority for FDA. Since I last testified, the agency's authorized 4 additional over-the-counter at-home tests, bringing the total number to 15. And the agency continues to prioritize the review of these type of tests. We also partnered with the NIH to establish ITAP, which streamlines validation and authorization of antigen tests with potential for large-scale manufacturing. We expect shorter review times for such EUA requests due to our partnership with ITAP. In fact, the first 2 tests that participated in this program were authorized in 2 days or less from the time FDA received the final data. So this is a very good model for government assistance of diagnostic manufacturers. In this new program, ITAP will prioritize new over-the-counter test submissions that could be manufactured at significant scale to accelerate the availability of high-quality, accurate, and reliable tests for the public as quickly as possible. Third, as new variants continue to emerge, it's crucial to expand the country's arsenals of COVID-19 therapeutics, especially for those unable to get vaccinated or who can't respond to vaccination. Since I last testified, 3 therapeutics have been authorized for use in the treatment of COVID-19 for emergency use. The first of these EUAs, Evusheld, was authorized for the prevention of COVID-19. The other 2 therapies, Paxlovid and Molnupiravir, as you heard from Dr. Fauci, are the first authorized treatments for COVID-19 in the form of a pill that can be taken orally, which is a major step in the fight against this global pandemic. These authorizations provide new tools to combat COVID-19 at a crucial time, and it should make antiviral therapy more accessible to people at high risk for progression. Now, while these are important tools, they're not substitute for vaccination in people for whom vaccination is recommended, and I continue to urge the public to get vaccinated if eligible. And fourth, we continue our mission of protecting the public from fraudulent medical products. Since March, we've refused admission of more than 23,000 lines of FDA-regulated products that we're trying to get into the country illegally. And finally, I want to assure the public that FDA is committed to continue to use every tool in our toolbox to fight this pandemic with the best available diagnostics, life-saving therapeutics, and vaccines. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Dr. Woodcock, let me just, the last question, Chair. Of the 15 tests that you've currently approved for over-the-counter, how many detect Omicron?
We're still working on that, but we believe all of them detect Omicron. We simply feel they are somewhat less sensitive than they were to some of the previous variants.
Of the 50 million tests that the ASPR has contracted for, how many of those tests detect Omicron?
I don't know which tests there are. We can get back to you on that.
So you haven't consulted with what we're purchasing on the 500 million. They haven't consulted with FDA to figure out whether the tests they're buying actually detect Omicron.
I believe they have. I simply don't have that list.
Okay, I thank the chair.
Leave that to Dr. Woodcock to answer the rest of that question.
Thank you. Certainly. Well, we can act very rapidly, but first I would like to say people should not use swabs that are designed as nasal swabs and try to swab their throat. They may stab themselves, okay? That would not be good, okay? What we need to do is have tests that, see whether the throat swab, as Dr. Fauci said, could provide more sensitivity. We do know the tests are picking up Omicron, but right now with less sensitivity than they did some of the other variants. As far as time, as I said, after the ITAP program does the testing at NIH, FDA has been able to authorize within a day or two of getting those data. However, the companies would have to change the test configuration to accommodate the swab, the larger swab that you'd use in the throat. That's probably what would take the most time, as well as seeing whether that was better.
And to continue with that point, as we've seen with some of the testing, the reagents or the materials that it really takes to use the test, is there the ability for people to return a test that might no longer work? Can those agents, any of that, be recycled or upcycled if they're returned to the company unopened? Like, how do we not dispose them and not get some recyclability out of that? Is that possible in some way?
We can get back to you on those parameters. Be happy to do that.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
So the trials are being done now as quickly as possible to see if they can get that data to have a uniform dose and a uniform regimen. But I'll pass it over to Dr. Woodcock.
Yeah, well, of course, I can't say a lot, but we are working very closely with the manufacturers of the vaccines on accelerating and making sure that vaccines are available for the youngest children.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Senator Murkowski.
Made. In terms of testing, and a parallel thought, Dr. Woodcock, maybe you can address this. The testing now is, by the time it gets to the retail, is somewhere in the $15 to $20 range, maybe as high as $22 or $23 in some places. Is there the prospect of, because I keep reading about different approaches to testing, that we might find a way to reduce the cost of testing down to, instead of $15 could be 15 cents, or at least for the chemical side of it. I realize then you've got to manufacture it and put it in cases and, packaging. Maybe you can provide a little optimism on that.
Sure. Well, I believe the RADx program, which Congress provided funding for quite some time ago, is really cutting edge, and they have a sort of a Shark Tank approach. They're really looking for innovation. They provide assistance to developers, and I really believe that's promising, that we will come up with additional technologies. They're easier to manufacture and actually easier for people to use and cheaper.
Great, thank you. And I have obviously more questions, but I'll yield the floor back.
Thank you.
for now.
Senator Braun.
You. We all know that vaccines remain the best way to protect yourself against existing variants of COVID-19. And I've been encouraged by the FDA's work to authorize vaccines for the public, but parents continue to be concerned that we don't have a vaccine for their kids as Omicron surges. Dr. Woodcock, can you provide an update on where we are in examination of the authorization of COVID-19 vaccines for children under 5?
Certainly, as Dr. Fauci said earlier, that they were one of the companies, Pfizer, had done trials. There were other trials going on. There were probably complications with the dose in the slightly older of the younger children, perhaps indicating that a third dose, as Dr. Fauci said, might be needed to the primary regimen. FDA is working with the company very closely. Trials are ongoing. I too have heard from many, many parents of the youngest children. They have other children in school. They may have immunocompromised individuals in their household, and there are people who really want to get this vaccine. So one of the vaccines, and get the children vaccinated. So we are working very intensely on this right now, and we're working, of course, with NIH and with the companies.
Thank you. I yield back.
Senator Burr.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Ms. Woodcock, I know you said a while ago that you're excited about what RADx accomplished, and I think we all are. But FDA issued revised guidance stating that it would focus its review efforts on at-home test and point-of-care COVID test applications from developers with the capacity to manufacture more than 500,000 tests per week within 3 months of being authorized. Why did the FDA move the goalpost at this particular time and suggest to companies that can't ramp up to that manufacturing that they're not going to get an accelerated EUA pathway?
Well, because of what some of the members have been discussing over the last several hours, that we have an urgent need for high volume home-based tests. And we have a queue. We have moved heaven and earth to get as many done as possible. We've authorized over 400 different kinds of tests or test collection devices during this pandemic. But as far as what the queue is, a priority, we're prioritizing the highest volume and just putting them to the front so that we can get home test kits into the hands of
Dr. Woodcock,
people.
I get what you're doing.
Yeah.
My question is this. What does this say to the innovative company that's out there that doesn't have the manufacturing capacity, and without us marrying them to a large manufacturing capacity, it's basically saying don't innovate because you're not going to get consideration under the EUA if you don't have a manufacturing capacity of 500,000 tests a week.
It says these are prioritized. It doesn't say we won't get to the others.
Well, get to the others. I mean, there's all a sense of urgency here. I just think that that might have been thought of before we did this. Let me go to you, Ms. Connell.
The FDA has recently set up protocols for monoclonal antibodies and antiviral pharmaceuticals to be prioritized based upon race. Dr. Woodcock, has the CDC or FDA done a multiple regression analysis on race to see if indeed it's an independent factor for increased morbidity and mortality? And if it hasn't, don't you think zip code would actually be more predictive? Wouldn't it make sense to prioritize these antivirals and testing, for that matter, to senior citizens and those with significant comorbidities, regardless of race, especially if the multiple regression analysis proves my opinion? Dr. Woodcock?
What FDA did was to recommend that people at high risk would be candidates for these products.
Did you do a multi-regression analysis on this independent factor?
We did not.
Okay.
We did not we don't make those kind of recommendations. We make.
But you can do studies, right? The FDA and CDC can do studies to see if it's truly an independent factor, or if not, truly the issue should be about your comorbidities and your age. So, Dr. Fauci, according to Forbes,
You, I know this has been talked about. I've watched a bit of the hearing from my office this morning and into this afternoon, but would you highlight for me, I suppose this is for Dr. Woodcock, lots of funding, I think adequate funding, certainly knowledge about winter months would bring an increase in cases. What's the challenge in not being better prepared for access to testing in-home and elsewhere? And how soon will that change?
I don't think that's, I think that's a question for Assistant Secretary McConnell. But I would tell you, FDA has approved or authorized over 400 tests or collection systems just for COVID. We've authorized 15 over-the-counter tests, but it's capacity that we're talking about here, production capacity.
So there's no, what you were telling me, Dr. Woodcock, is there's no problem with the FDA approval of tests. It's the manufacturing process and the supply chain.
We could do more with more resources. We have authorized over 2,000 different device products, including the 400 test-related products in 2 years. So that's an incredible increase in the workload, and we really appreciate the funding that Congress has provided. However, the test manufacturers, many of them give us incomplete results. We have to go back and forth with them. The ITAP program that we are doing with NIH for home testing, I think will improve that tremendously. That's a big advance forward. But there's also the matter of production capacity with this huge surge and so many more people becoming infected.
Is there a separate FDA results process in which the test is read and determined positive or negative? There's no challenges there in that process?
That's what the ITAP program over at NIH is doing. They're actually doing the laboratory and clinical testing for the manufacturers, and then they send us the data. And so it's standardized and it's a panel, and that is really accelerates our ability to get these authorized very quickly. As I said earlier, we've authorized them within 2 days of getting the data from the ITAP program. So that's a tremendous setup that I think is really beneficial, where we have standardized testing by scientists in the government, and that enables the manufacturers to get their products through very fast.
Thank you. Ms. O'Connell?
Of combining the funding that was available to be able to move the therapies through faster. BARDA never stopped supporting therapy work, but I'll let Dr. Woodcock.
Yeah, there is, we still regard there is an extreme unmet medical need for therapeutics at most stages of the disease, particularly the late stages where we still don't have interventions, and so people are dying in the late stage of disease, getting into the ICU, going on the ventilator. So of course, we've have 670 INDs that we've been, clinical protocols that are ongoing to my knowledge. So their robust development is still ongoing in the therapeutic area.
So how much funding has BARDA allocated to therapeutics this year, and how much is left to spend?
I'll have to go back and check that on the actual